السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نبدأ. This talk is about competency-based curricula or competency-based education. I'm going to give an introduction in the beginning, and then I'm going to speak a bit about the expression of outcomes of education, then how these outcomes are categorized, and finally I'm going to talk about outcome-based curriculum. First, we need to define educational outcomes, and these are statements describing what a learner or trainee will become in the future, or will be able to do after or upon completion of a particular assignment, a particular class, a course, or a program. And they describe the change in behavior, and this is what learning is about: the change in behavior in the three domains of learning, which are the knowledge domain, the skills domain, and the attitudes domain. Now, these outcomes define the abilities required for practice. So when I'm going to speak about the nursing profession, what are the educational outcomes of a nursing program? What are the abilities required for the practice of nursing? So educational outcomes are the abilities required for a particular practice. And so they describe what the professional can do, and they determine the professional's attributes. Those are the qualities of the attribute of the graduate. And these are described differently by educational organizations and bodies related to the profession or education. And they, in curriculum documents, they are described as the intents or the intentions of the program of study. And these are ensured through learning activities and verified through assessment activities. So they are the beginning of the whole academic process. Now, these are the outcomes. How are they expressed? Now, an expression of the outcomes is an issue of terminology, and this is why we need to discuss a little bit some terms related to outcomes. So what are the most important outcomes related terms? First, what are abilities? What are competence? What is competence? What is competencies, or what are competencies? And what are attributes? If we start with abilities, what are abilities? What do we mean when we say abilities? Abilities are the quality of being able to do something. So it's a quality of being able to do anything related to a profession, or generally as a person. It could be inherent. So what we mean by that, you are born with it, or acquired. And acquiring it could be as a result of learning, as a result of training, or just as a result of experience working in a particular field. You gain some abilities, and it could belong to one domain or more of the three domains we described in the previous slide. On the other hand, what is competence? Is it different from abilities? Yes, competence is a level. So when a learner or a trainee starts in a particular domain, he is usually at the beginning, the learner is a novice, and then he becomes an advanced beginner. Then in the middle of the journey, he will be qualified as being competent. Then with further learning and training, the learner will become proficient, and then with application of what they learn, they become expert. So it's a level in the middle of a long journey. But what about competency? Competence is a level, it's a descriptor. Now, what about competency? So let us compare. Competence is a noun that refers to the ability to do something, usually at a basic or acceptable level. So it follows the learner's beginner stage. He's now competent, he can do these things. But what about competency? Competency is an alternative version of competence, and usually refers to an area in which one has been professionally trained. So when we say competency-based education, it means we identify the competency we would like our graduate to acquire, and then we build a program to make sure that these trainees or learners learn. And so, by the way, they can be classified. You start with some activity-specific competencies. When you finish the activity, you will gain certain competencies. Now, when you do a number of activities, then you will acquire some occupation-specific competencies. And then, generally speaking, during your academic journey, you acquire some common core competencies or social, behavioral, or foundational competencies. Now, is there a difference between competencies versus performance competence? Yes, we defined competence as a level or competencies as the specific abilities. So competence requires knowledge, skills, and attitudes. Then we can say, now you are competent, now you have competence. So this is how it is different from competences. Now, the three domains, we start with knowledge domain, and this is about facts, concepts, and principles. Now, it is acquired or maybe expanded during the learning process, and according to the Bloom taxonomy, to Bloom's, it has 6 levels according to Bloom, and these are the 6 levels. They start with recognizing and recalling facts, and this is called the remembering level, and then understanding what the facts mean, and this is understand level, and then applying the facts, rules, concepts, and ideas, and this is the apply level. And then the learner will acquire the ability to breaking down information into component parts, and this is the analyzed level. And then actually judging the value of information or ideas, and this is the evaluate level. And finally, combining parts to make a new whole, and this is called the create level. So the knowledge, although maybe at any particular point in time, learners can jump from learning to analyzing straight away. So they are not sequential, so to speak. Now, so according to Bloom, it has 6 levels. Now the foundation and knowledge forms the foundation for cognitive skills. Those are the skills of the brain, or in particular the frontal lobe of the brain. And so Albert Einstein said it beautifully. He said education is not the learning of facts, it's rather the training of the mind to think. So knowledge is not wanted for itself, but it is needed to build, to train the mind to think. Now, and so it is the foundation for cognitive skills, also the foundation and or complementary component for other learning domains. You need knowledge for certain skills, and you need knowledge for attitudes. So to acquire or gain skills and attitudes, you need some knowledge background. The second domain is the skills domain. And now what are they? These are the abilities required for practice. And they describe what the professional can actually do using his body, not the brain, not the mind. They determine the professional attributes and the qualities of the professional, and they are described differently by different education organizations and bodies, and they are also described as intentions in curriculum documents, issued through learning activities, and verified through assessment activities, similar to knowledge. Now, we described competence and we described competencies. What is then the difference between skills and competencies? Now, skills versus competence, how are they different? If you look at this table, the skills are based on expertise, while competencies need more. So it is not only the expertise of psychomotor skills or even cognitive skills, but it is based on behavior. Skills has a universal meaning. Anybody, when you say skills, something comes to mind, while competencies have a contextual meaning, and so on. So there are differences between the two terms, skills versus competence. The third domain is attitudes, and attitudes is a little thing that makes a big difference. Attitudes are very important as a learning domain. Attitudes refer to a set of emotions and beliefs that formulate perspectives towards a particular object, person, thing, or event, and it is manifested as social behaviors. So, what are graduate attributes? So, you define before you start the program, what do you expect your graduate to look like? What are the qualities of your graduate? And so these are the high level qualities or personality traits that students should develop from their university experience. So going through the experience, they are going to change and they will acquire certain qualities or personality traits. And these could be classified into professional ones, needed by the profession, and personal ones which makes the character of the individual. So personal qualities. The personals are also known as generic and or soft skills, and they are considered as common or core for all university graduates in an institution, regardless of your professional degree. And they are described differently, but these are the common or the general areas in which define the general common graduate attributes. For example, being an innovator, being a self-directed learner or globally aware, being a communicator, a problem solver, a civically engaged, critical thinker, a collaborator, information and media literate, and financial and economic literate. All these are qualities, and these are general qualities. They are not for a very specific profession, but they are needed by all professions, and they are needed by people as civilians. Now, different institutions describe them differently. So in the learning outcomes competence for undergraduate medical education in Europe, the Turing Project for medicine, they described learning objectives and learning outcomes and competencies. If we look closely, the described learning objectives are specified by teaching staff. They describe particular items of learning related to a component of a degree program, such as a lecture, a tutorial, a module, or an attachment. So this is specified by teaching what they expect. While learning outcomes also set out described by teaching staff, but refer to the whole degree program and relate to the point of graduation. They are usually specified with a hierarchy of levels, with the top level consisting of large domains of learning. Within each of these domains, subsidiary outcomes are described with increasing levels of granularity. This definition was put forward by Professor Ronald Hardin in 2002. While competencies are acquired by and belong to students or graduates rather than teachers, for a graduate who has successfully completed the degree program, their competencies should be at least equivalent to the prescribed learning outcomes, although they are very likely to have developed further in particular areas of learning. And so, as you can see, different bodies and different institutions, different authorities have very specific definitions for these terms. Now, how are they categorized, generally speaking? Now, you can categorize outcomes as domain areas. For example, cognitive, psychomotor, and affective. They can also be categorized as themes or as attributes or based on activities, general abilities that they can actually carry out. And so in competency frameworks, they can base their framework on domains, themes, attributes, or activities. Now, as far as frameworks are concerned, frameworks are competency frameworks. There are competency frameworks, and there are qualifications frameworks. For example, the Saudi Arabian qualifications framework with certain level descriptors. These are the level descriptors in the area of knowledge, skills, and competence. And in competence, the autonomy and responsibility, the practice, and the attribute. So this is and this is a translation of it. And so in competency framework, you can describe these outcomes. Now, how do we classify these qualifications framework? First of all, qualification framework can be issued by continents. For example, there is a European qualification framework, there is an Australian competency framework, and countries can also issue qualification framework. They call them the national competency frameworks, like the Saudi Arabian or the national qualification framework of Saudi Arabia. Now, they are issued by regulatory bodies and accreditation agencies, and they usually they use domains and or areas. And this, for example, the Australian qualifications framework, and the descriptors are divided by knowledge, skills, and application of knowledge and skills. For example, this is just an example. There is the European qualifications framework. This is of another continent, and these, for example, are also using domains, using knowledge, skills, and competencies, and they describe learning outcomes under each of the domains. While the competency frameworks, not the qualifications framework, these are issued by regulatory bodies or professional bodies. And some are theme-based, they use domains, learning domains. Some are attributes-based, they use the qualities. And some are activity-based, they use abilities for their definition or description. Now, the theme-based frameworks, competencies are characterized as domains, and the enabling outcomes are listed for each domain. And the examples in the medical profession as the general minimum essential requirement of the International Institute of Medical Education, tomorrow's doctors, the Scottish doctor, the Accreditation Council of General Medical Education, and the Saudi Med. These are all theme-based competency frameworks. This is the IGMIR, and this one is the Saudi Med's framework, and these 7 are the 7 themes, and this is the outcomes for graduates of the General Medical Council. They divided them into 3 themes, outcomes 1 and outcomes 2 and outcomes 3. One is professional values and behaviors, professional skills, and then professional knowledge. Now, the Scottish doctor also divided the outcomes by themes, but they used 12 themes. And the Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education also have 7 themes. Now, some are attribute-based competency framework, and the competencies are categorized as attributes. And the enabling outcomes are listed for each attribute. Examples are the CANMED and the Medical Schools Objectives Project of the United States. This is the CANMEDs, and as you can see, they describe the attributes of the graduate. Is a medical expert, a manager, a collaborator, a communicator, a professional scholar, and a health advocate. Also, in the Learning Objectives, Medical Schools Objective Project of the USA, they describe the graduate as altruistic, knowledgeable, skillful, and dutiful. This is how, generally speaking, the 2 types of frameworks are either theme-based or attribute-based. There are different frameworks and models for curriculum. There are frameworks for curriculum, and there are models of curriculum. The curriculum models are classified as either focus models. What is the focus on? Is it subject-centered, or learning-centered, or problem-centered, depending on the focus. There is a classification of models into product models versus process or design models. Are you basing your model on the product or the process or design? There are framework-based models. It's a framework, and the framework can be used, based on many different things. For example, the prisms, the spices, and the rifle models. There is evolution-based models. Is it traditional, the old school, innovative, the new school or a hybrid between the two, and this is based on evolution. And there is prescriptive versus descriptive. Are you going to prescribe a curriculum or describe a curriculum? The focus model, as the subject-centered curriculum model, describes what needs to be studied and how. The instruction is standardized and predetermined, while the learner-centered curriculum model adjusts to individuals' needs, interests, and goals. Instruction is diverse and differentiating, while the problem-centered models focus on problem analysis and solving skills. The instruction is relevant and promotes creativity and innovation. These depending on the focus. Now, the product model versus process model. The product model leads to a desirable end product. Factual knowledge, skill mastery, competencies acquisition, attitudes and values accretion. Behavioral objectives are used to facilitate communication of the outcomes and they guide selection of instructional structure and content. They promote accuracy of testing and evaluation. The objectives specify cognitive, psychomotor, and affective domains. This is an objective model. You specify the curriculum area, then you design the objectives, and then you derive content, material, and methodology. You evaluate. You can go back to changing the objectives or go to the change your curriculum idea. This is the objectives model. While the value of contents is beyond achievement of objectives, the value of the content. While the process model aims to provide opportunities for development of learners' abilities, their tendencies and capacities. Abilities are regarded as unity, and learning activities have their own value and can be evaluated on its own standards. Curriculum is outlined based on intentions rather than objectives. And this is the process model. You start with the curriculum idea and goals, then the content methodology. Then you derive the outcomes, and then you design the evaluation. Now, this is the process model. Now, the framework-based models, for example, the SPICES, the prisms, and the rifle, are educational strategy frameworks introduced to reforming, organizing, and sustaining innovation of medical curriculum. The curricula are designed based on approaches to learning that are believed to be best serve the intent. And innovative curricula are a response to critique to traditional curricula. For example, teacher-centered driven, content-focused, information-oriented, hospital-based. These are the traditional, and so the innovative curricula responded to critique to this tradition, while the hybrid curricula combine the advantage of both at various levels. These are the examples. This is the first example, is the SPICES, based on the strategies, which is the student-centeredness, the problem-based education, interprofessional education, or integration, and community-based education with electives and a systematic approach. This is very famous, the SPICES model, and it is now adopted by many medical schools. It shifts away from teacher-centeredness to student-centeredness, from information gathering to problem-based education, from discipline-based to integrated, from hospital-based to community-based, and from standard programs to standard electives, from apprenticeship to a systematic approach. And medical schools now can adopt problem-based education completely. The established one can change. The first change can be complete change from traditional to problem-based, or parallel track. You continue with your traditional approach, and then you introduce problem-based, and then you end up with problem-based, or you start with traditional and you minimize traditional gradually and introduce problem-based gradually until you reach whole problem-based, full-fledged problem-based education. The other is the prisms, and the prisms is based on the characteristics. So the clinical education will be product-related, will be relevant, interprofessional, shorter and smaller, in multi-sites and symbiotic. So it is based on the characteristics of the of the program. The rifle, on the other hand, is another one, but also based on characteristics. It should be realistic, integrated, feedback, learning, and evaluation. This is called the rifle model. Finally, the evolution-based models. The traditional one starts with the foundation and followed by application. The innovative one is integrated and applying new approaches, while the hybrid one is a combination between traditional and innovative curriculum. Now, all the ones I described earlier can be done prescriptively or descriptively. Prescriptive models guided by objectives, while descriptive models guided by context or the situation. The prescriptive models indicate what the curriculum designers should do, how to create a curriculum. This is the prescriptive. Now, for example, or the X objectives, example, objective-based model, now fallen from favor, while outcome-based education, which is still popular. Now, outcome-based model focus content on real-world student outcome, and it ensures assessment accurately, reflect student capabilities, and provide applicable supporting course material. It is usually student-centered, clear, and flexible. Now, the descriptive models describe what designers actually do, what a curriculum covers. Example, situational model also could be based on objectives and outcomes. Now it has got thorough and systematic analysis of situation the curriculum prepares for. It doesn't have to follow a specific order of steps. That is rather identified by the context of the curriculum plan. And this is a situational model. You start with the situational analysis, you state the intent, then you build the content, and then teaching and learning, and then assessment, and then you organize and implement, you monitor and evaluate. This is called the situational model, starting with situational analysis. Now, these descriptive models, then, it doesn't have to follow specific order of steps. It's rather identified by the context of the curriculum plan. Now, the outcome-based model, from what we described, what do we mean by outcome-based model? Used for different types of models and frameworks described earlier. You start with the desired outcomes students will be able to, and then you derive the content, teaching and learning, assessment and evaluation. This is the general outcome-based model. It starts with the end in mind. And now, in the outcome-based model, it can be mastery-based education, criteria for measuring proficiency, adaptive to learner needs, the learner support is provided, and adequate time to achieve proficiency. Now, there is competency-based, all characteristics of mastery-based education, plus it is self-paced. While outcome-based education, all characteristics of competency-based education, plus understanding why proficiency matters. And so, mastery-based, and then you expand the mastery-based, it becomes competency-based, and if you expand that, it becomes outcome-based education. And so, to summarize competency-based education, it must achieve these objectives: personalized learning, cost effectiveness, approved compliance, student success, customized curriculum, and real-world job skills. In addition to the most important of these are the critical thinking skills. Now, if you want to decide, you can decide to apply different models for the same curriculum. For example, is it a subject focus model? Is it subject-centered or learner-centered or problem-centered? You have to pick, and then you pick, is it product or process? Is it descriptive or prescriptive? Is it, which one? Is it the SPICES, PRISM, or rifle? And is it traditional, innovative, or hybrid? Then you can decide on these 5 different domains. Thank you very much.